vulnerability without any desire or bridge to create connection with the other person is, again, masturbation. Yeah. And, there's this quote by a fellow colleague. I'm blanking out her name, and I have to make sure to credit her for this. But, vulnerability has to be considered of the other person. Her name is Jordan. I'm blanking out her name, but it has to be considered of the other person. Like you said, 30 minutes of vulnerability that is not really present or attuned. What are we doing with that? What is that? Mm-hmm. So vulnerability is relational. Vulnerability is... Intimacy happens at the edge of vulnerability. So without it, it's the glue. It's the glue of a relationship. But just because somebody is being vulnerable with us, it doesn't mean that they're the right fit. We might have a date with someone who's really vulnerable. We feel really connected to them, but that also doesn't mean that they would be a good fit for us, right? They might share a lot of traumatic things and expose themselves, but does that mean that's someone we want to create and build a life with? Maybe. Mm-hmm. We have to sit with that, but vulnerability can be really intoxicating. Really intoxicating. I mean, you see like performers, actors, you see them pouring their soul. There's nothing that draws us more like a magnet to another human than them revealing those parts of their soul, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, how would you define vulnerability?
Ooh, I think that, I'll speak from the I. Mm-hmm. I, in my life, see vulnerability as sharing something in a moment that brings up fear for me, but I also have the intuition to know that it's going to bring more love and peace to the moment.
Beautiful.
Because if I just shared everything that I was afraid of without the awareness or the understanding of how it's going to impact a moment, then I could just be vulnerable without borders, which I think is really unhealthy. I think strategic vulnerability and vulnerability without any borders at all, aka oversharing, yes, gets tucked into this one phrase that I've heard so much. And it's someone that says, oh, well, I'm just speaking my truth. And when I hear somebody say that, oh, I'm just speaking my truth, I get the sense that it's their ego that is putting a veil of acceptance on potentially really harmful things that they're sharing under the guise of it being my truth.
Yes.
And I think that's a dark web in the vulnerability. I mean, you're writing a whole book on it, right? I guess you can call it a vulnerability space, or let's just call it a topic. But yeah, it's the awareness of me to feel fear around sharing something that creates either safety or love or connection or something good. Does it create something good in the moment? Mm-hmm. And if it does, then vulnerability is a practice, like you said, it's a skill set. And I think there is no 0 to 100 with vulnerability. It's like learning how to ride a bike of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to fall down a bunch. I'm probably going to overshare sometimes. Or maybe sometimes I'm in so much fear I won't share at all. And that lack of sharing actually disconnects. It creates a Grand Canyon with my woman and I. So I think, like you said earlier, it's like straight up a moving target.
It is.
It's a moving target, and there's just no way to have mastery over it unless we are curious about it, which is, I'm sure, why you're writing the book.
Yes.
We who struggle with the thing, we teach.
We teach.
And then as we teach it, do you find this when you teach clients, when you coach people, it's like you learn so much more by coaching people and teaching people than you ever would just going to school and reading a book and even going to conferences yourself. Do you find that to be true?
Definitely in the beginning a lot in my work, for sure. Breakthrough after breakthrough. Countertransference would happen a lot when I was doing therapy.
We're like they're having a moment and you're like realizing in your life that you're having the same moment or the same awareness.
The parallel processing.
And you just keep quiet because you're the coach, but you're like, yeah, good job. Mental note, I'm learning that for myself.
But thank you for that gem that you just helped me, that you just helped me put together.
I've totally had those moments.
Yeah. It's so human, that parallel processing. We call it countertransference in therapy. And it's that process when you're working with someone and it brings up something in yourself.
Yes.
And then to go and make sure you do your own therapy to work through that so that it's not getting projected back onto the client. So it's a lot of ethical things that I'm really grateful for my therapy background on. And the name of the woman was Jordan Pickle. I want to make sure that
cool last name.
her. It's very cool.
Yeah, vulnerability can feel like a pickle.
Well, and you said something that I think is right along that. If you're just sharing without any what is my intention for this, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's the radical honesty movement, which lots of thoughts and feelings about. I remember going on.
I can tell you're not a total fan.
I'm not a total fan because it's what you said. It's like, it feels a little bit like verbal diarrhea. it's not always relational. I remember I dated a guy very briefly who went through that space, and sometimes the things that he would share were so inappropriate, like beyond inappropriate, like borderline gross. And I don't mean that from a place of judging what he was sharing, but it was so not attuned. It was like, you're just sharing this thing that has nothing to do with me or us, or what is this? Like, I just felt like it was like a dumping bag for this projected thing. And he was also going through a phase where he was like, I feel like I don't even know how, like, to be vulnerable. Like, I'm so lost. And so it's like, we have to find our own relationship with it. But you said the word boundaries. I think until we know our boundaries and really have good internal boundaries, it can be hard to be vulnerable. Because then it's like, whoa, how do I bring myself kind of back from it, right?
You co-led a training with our buddy Mark Groves, and it was about boundaries. I haven't gotten to see it yet. I'm sure it's awesome. Did you find a common thread with those and with most people that struggle with boundaries that always relates to attachment styles? In other words, is attachment style a way in which we either enforce the boundary or have it be porous, or is it a separate topic completely?
So the course was Attachment 101. It was an attachment course.
Oh, it was an attachment course.
Yeah, it was an attachment
Okay.
course. I think we talked about boundaries a little bit in that, but there's definitely some crossover, of course, with attachment and boundaries, but there's also a lot of other family of origin dynamics that can shape the kinds of boundaries we might be more vulnerable to getting violated as an adult.
Okay.
So that might be we're more susceptible to someone violating our emotional boundaries if we grew up having those violated as a kid. Or physical boundaries as a little bit more universally understood, spiritual boundaries. You said something about pedestaling guests that reminded me of one of the spiritual boundaries that can get violated. So as a kid, if we had a parent that was untouchable, never vulnerable with us, that can almost cause us to put them on this pedestal of just not being able to relate to them in a way that was connective. So, and I'm not saying that is what happened for you, but it helped me connect to that the spiritual boundary piece where somebody's almost on, or maybe they're a religious person or a pastor, but they're not vulnerable about their human experience. So that child kind of is always like, can be susceptible to cults, can be susceptible to environments where the other knows best and almost like violate their own sense of self as a result, because that's an area they're vulnerable. Or somebody that grew up with their intellectual boundaries violated, grew up in a home where, let's say, the stuff that was going on was never addressed. Parent comes home drunk, sleeps on the couch every night, nobody talks about it. So it's almost like they start to gaslight themselves, and they can end up in relationships where somebody projects a lot on them, but they don't know how to say, like, hey, you're actually making assumptions about me that aren't true. What's happening for you? So this is another rabbit hole.
Podcast, yeah.
We won't go there. But
If you love that video, you'll love the one on the screen right now. Click the one on the screen and enjoy.